Welcome to the Nutrition Science Podcast, where we help you cut through the noise and make informed, science-based decisions about nutrition and your health. How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Nutrition Science Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Adrian Chavez, and in this episode, we are going to be discussing 10 nutritious, health-promoting, quote-unquote, superfoods that I recommend eating more of. And the reason that I use the quotations around the term superfoods is because that term has largely been taken over by marketers and often is used to promote exotic, very high priced products that often aren't even very nutritious and don't have much data backing up their health benefits. Today, what we're going to talk about are 10 everyday foods that you can find in the grocery store that you can incorporate into your diet on a regular basis that have a consistent body of research backing up their potential health benefits when you include them into your diet regularly. So I'm looking forward to discussing some of these different nutritious foods in this episode. I think it's going to be extremely helpful for a lot of you. Before we get into the episode, I want to quickly discuss the last episode. So the last episode was on cancer nutrition. We talked about whether or not cancer rates are increasing. I brought my friend Dr. Crystal Zuniga on the podcast. She's a professor at the University of Texas. She's a specialist in cancer nutrition. And I had a few comments of people who said that they felt like I didn't give her enough time to chat. I want to acknowledge that. I apologize. I reached out to her. I listened to the episode after I got those comments because I was surprised. I mean, I don't really think about these things sometimes as I'm recording. And I agree. I think that I definitely spoke too much during that episode, didn't give her enough time to chat. And there's a few reasons possibly for that. So it wasn't any disrespect to her or that I don't respect her opinion. It's not the case at all. Her and I are friends. I respect her greatly. I brought her on the show twice for a reason. I just truly didn't have an outline for that episode besides talking about the statistics at the beginning. And so I think on my part, I probably ended up turning that into more of a conversation than an interview and just going back and forth and interjecting and going on a couple of rants that I probably shouldn't have, given the fact that I had brought her on for an interview. So I had a discussion with her about it. I appreciate those of you who have reached out to me with feedback about the episode. Again, I apologize. That was not the intent. I truly had no outline with this episode, and typically I'll have an outline of different questions that I want to ask. But in this case, I reached out to her because I kept getting asked about the cancer statistics. And I reached out to her and said, hey, can we discuss the cancer statistics? And that's pretty much all I had on the agenda as far as interview questions. And I think that led to a more conversational aspect as opposed to an interview where I was probably taking over the discussion more than I should have when I'm bringing a guest onto the show. So I apologize, those of you who reached out to me and did let me know that you would have liked to have heard more of Crystal. She has been on another episode as well, so I'd recommend checking that out as well, and then checking out her content on social media and elsewhere. And I'll probably bring her back on for another episode in the future. Again, her and I are friends. We spent time together in person several times, and we had a conversation about this. Again, it was not meant to be any disrespect or anything of that nature, and I apologize if it came off that way. With that said, let's go ahead and jump into the content of the show and talk about the 10 nutritious and health promoting foods that I recommend eating more of. And this list is part of a larger list that I put together, and it's offered as a part of a course that I offer called the Nutrition Mastery Blueprint. And this course is basically everything that I think someone would need to know in order to build out a dietary plan that works for them, that's sustainable, that's flexible, that helps them lose body fat, that helps them prevent the risk of chronic diseases, Alzheimer's, cancer, heart disease. If those are the things you're interested in with your nutrition, and you're lacking the correct knowledge in order to achieve those things, this course is meant to offer a solution to that problem. It's a lot of the information that we talk about in this podcast, but organized in a way to take you through a process of first setting goals, having realistic expectations, and working towards those goals, understanding your energy needs, your protein needs, your fiber needs, how to set up a dietary plan that works for you, how to make smart decisions on weekends and holidays, and how to create a flexible plan that works throughout those situations. And also, like we just going to discuss in this episode, how to incorporate more nutritious foods that are likely to have positive effects on your health, how to avoid foods or what are the foods that we need to minimize and limit that could have a negative effect on our health. And again, we talk about all this stuff in this podcast, but the way that this course lays it out, it's meant to put it all in one place for you so that you can go to it. You can go through the course, learn the information, apply the information, and see a transformation in your health. So, if you're interested in learning more about that course, I will put a link in the show notes. You can also go to dradrianchavez.com/mastery and you'll find the information there. Or if you just go to dradrianchavez.com and you click on the main homepage, there's going to be a button there that will take you to the course. And if you are listening to this on the day that it's released or the week that it's released, this is going to be May 26th. I am offering a $75 discount on the course for anyone who signs up by June 1st. So if you're interested in that and you'd like to learn more, check out the link in the show notes or go to dradrianchavez.com or dradrianchavez.com/mastery. You'll find more information about that. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. First food that I'm going to talk about is mushrooms. So, high consumption of mushrooms in population based studies is associated with lower rates of several types of cancers. Mushrooms are rich in several types of compounds. One's called ergothioneine. It's also rich in a compound called glutathione. You may have heard of this. It's an antioxidant within our body, and we can also consume it through food. Mushrooms are also high in a type of fiber called beta glucans. And these beta glucans have actually been isolated and used as supplements in a variety of different studies. And they show some immune regulating properties. So the goal is not to eat mushrooms to boost your immune system or regulate your immune system. But what we're doing here is we're incorporating foods that have micronutrients that have potential health benefits so that when we incorporate more of those foods into our diet, this combination of foods is providing us with a wide variety of potential health benefits. So sometimes when I talk about these things, I'll say, mushrooms can protect against cancer, and then people think they need to go out and eat whole bunch of mushrooms to try to prevent cancer later on. And I see this often too. I've met people who have, been focused on eating cups of broccoli every single day for quote unquote cancer prevention. Well, my goal with this is not to get you to think that you have to eat all of these foods in high quantities in order to achieve these outcomes, but just to introduce you to the potential health benefits of some of these foods because it's pretty fascinating. A lot of these plant foods, particularly, have a variety of nutrients that have potential health benefits. And when we incorporate them into our diet, there's likely to be health benefits of these synergistic effects of all of these nutrients. And this is probably one of the reasons that we see more plant rich diets being associated with better health outcomes, is due to the variety of nutrients that are found in these plant foods. And this isn't going to be completely plant foods in terms of the health promoting foods that I recommend eating more of, but plant foods have a wider variety of micronutrients, and they have what are called phytochemicals. And these phytochemicals are we have our essential vitamins and minerals, and then we have plant nutrients, essentially these phytochemicals, and there's thousands of them that are found in plant foods that have potential health benefits. And when we've isolated them and studied them in terms of their mechanisms against like cancer cells and other type of disease states, they seem to have protective effects. Now, when we isolate a certain nutrient and mix it with cancer cells in a test tube, that's not at all what's happening in our body, but it's giving us somewhat of an indication that if we consume a little bit more of these, they might have some protective effects. The next thing that I want to discuss is citrus fruits. Citrus fruits are a rich source of vitamin C. Many people are aware of that. Things like lime and lemon and oranges and grapefruit. They are also rich in a class of nutrients called flavonoids. These are, again, just a wide variety of different plant nutrients, and there's different classifications. But these citrus fruits are particularly high in this class of nutrients called flavonoids. And consumption of citrus fruits is associated with a lower risk of heart disease, as well as a reduction in the risk of oral, gastric, lung, and breast cancers. So I recommend having some citrus fruits as a snack, like oranges or grapefruits. You can also put lemon or lime in your water, but simple way is just kind of having them as a snack. I have orange almost every day. I keep oranges in our fridge. I give oranges to my son on a regular basis. We switch out sometimes with grapefruits and other citrus fruits as well. but oranges are typically the main staple in our home, and limes are also pretty common in terms of being added to meals. But it's easy way to do that. Just keep oranges on hand, snack on them. If you have easy access to grapefruits or other citrus fruits, that's great. Grapefruits have been pretty pricey here for quite some time, but oranges are definitely a staple in our home. Next thing I'm going to discuss is something that you probably heard me talk about quite a bit, and I would be remiss to leave it off this list today. And this is berries. And when I say berries, I typically will include cherries and grapes and any small dark colored fruit. Pomegranates kind of fit into this category as well. They are not the same food, of course. They're not the same fruit, but they have similar properties due to their color. So the dark red, purple, blue pigmentation is indicative of a class of micronutrients called anthocyanins. And these anthocyanins are powerful antioxidants, and they seem to have a protective effect against heart disease, brain disease, and cancer as well. So this one is one that I got really fascinated with early on in my going into depth with nutrition. In one of my first graduate courses, I was assigned a research paper on grapes, and I wrote a 30-page paper on the micronutrients found in grapes. And a lot of the discussion was around these anthocyanins. I also talked about resveratrol, but these nutrients in cell culture studies seem to be very protective against cancer and then also against oxidation and oxidative stress because they have powerful antioxidant properties, so they protect against damage. And that's thought to be one of the reasons that they help with heart disease, because if you have antioxidant micronutrients that help prevent oxidative damage that can occur in the blood vessels, that can cause the arteries to stiffen, that can help those blood vessels dilate better and release more nitric oxide. And that's one of the mechanisms among many that may be how these berries and other anthocyanin rich fruits can help to protect against heart disease. So, one of the things that I recommend with these foods is they are often a lot less expensive and just as nutritious if you purchase them frozen. So, I have frozen berries in a smoothie or in a oatmeal or on top of pancakes for breakfast almost every day in some capacity. Now, I still buy fresh, but frozen are less expensive and they also last longer. So for me, if I buy a fresh pint of strawberries, it's highly unlikely that I'm going to eat all of those. But if I buy a frozen bag of strawberries, I'm going to eat them eventually. So this is a great way to save money, to reduce food waste, and to get food that is just as nutritious, if not more nutritious, is to choose frozen here. And the reason that I say that it might be more nutritious is because frozen foods are picked at the peak of ripeness as opposed to before they become ripe, and they don't have to go through the transport. They're peaked and they're frozen. And so fresh food is peaked before it's ripe, and then it ripens during transport, and it might lose nutrients while it's on the shelf. And you don't really have that issue with fresh food. Next on the list is going to be dark leafy greens. So it's going to be number 4 on the list, dark leafy greens. So consumption of dark leafy greens is associated with a 16% reduction in heart disease. So people who eat dark leafy greens have 16% lower risk as opposed to those who don't. This is, one major large scale study. This doesn't mean that this is, exactly the case, but it seems to be protective against heart disease. And dark leafy green consumption may also protect against bone loss as well. And one of the main reasons for this is that leafy greens are a good source of vitamin K. And vitamin K is most people aren't eating enough of it. And if you have one serving of pretty much any leafy green, you're getting more than your daily needs of vitamin K. So if you are consuming any amount of leafy greens, you are meeting your vitamin K needs. Most people aren't meeting their vitamin K needs. And so if you're not consuming leafy greens, get a serving in each day if you can. So get some type of spinach, collard greens, kale, any type of leafy greens that you can, romaine lettuce, and make sure that you're getting those greens in so that you meet your needs of vitamin K. Leafy greens are also typically a rich source of magnesium, nitrates, carotenoids, and other nutrients. And all of these nutrients probably combined together to have some of the heart and bone health benefits. Vitamin K seems to be an important one as well, though, because it is important for both heart and bone health. So, as I mentioned, you have spinach, you have collard greens, you have turnip greens, arugula, kale. There's many different options in terms of leafy greens, but definitely get your leafy greens in on a regular basis. You can just literally cook just a little bit of spinach and add it to any meal. It doesn't change the taste. You can add it to smoothies, but I recommend if you're having spinach to cook it up a little bit to reduce some of the oxalates. And I talked about this in the anti-nutrients episode that I'll link in the show notes. But oxalates are not a big deal for most people, but they can be for some people, and you can reduce them down by quite a bit just by cooking the spinach up just a little bit. So cook down your spinach. It becomes more nutritious when we cook it a little bit. Most leafy greens do because we can't break down those cell walls very well. But when we cook it a little bit, it breaks down the cell walls of these leafy greens to where some of the nutrients inside of the plant becomes more bioavailable. So dark leafy greens is going to be number 4 on the list. So far we have mushrooms, citrus fruit, berries, dark leafy greens. What do we have next? We have nuts, and there are dozens and dozens of studies that show that when we eat more nuts, LDL cholesterol goes down, blood pressure goes down, blood sugar control improves. People have lower rates of heart disease, lower rates of cancer, and nuts are a rich source of fiber, folate, healthy fats, and a variety of different micronutrients, depending on the type of nut that we're talking about. And you can have them, they're easy to incorporate into your diet. Just have them as a snack. You can crush them and sprinkle them on top of oatmeal, or you can have some nut butter. You can have them incorporated into cereal. They're super easy to incorporate into your diet. Now, they are high in calories. This is a reason that some people avoid nuts, is because you get about 200 calories per serving, which is a small amount of food overall. When you look at, it's 1 ounce of nuts, which is a small palmful. This is understandable. I still recommend including them into your diet. Just be strategic about it. Pair them with some other filling foods that are going to be high in protein, and just be mindful of your portions. Another thing is we actually don't absorb all of the calories in nuts. So if you're eating whole nuts and say it's 200 calories per 1 ounce, you're actually only getting like 160, 175 ish, depending on the nut and depending on the processing. So if it's actually made into a nut butter, we get more calories out of it as opposed to eating the full nut. And that's because we can't actually digest the entire thing. We can't break down all of the fiber in there, and we can't extract some of the calories from the nuts. And so, for that reason, it's actually a little bit less calories than what would be listed on the label. But in any case, they are nutritious. They have positive effects on various aspects of our health. And I do not recommend that anyone avoid them from a calorie perspective. Just be mindful of your consumption, incorporate them into other filling foods. Just be mindful of your consumption and eat them with other filling foods. Next on the list is tea and coffee. And I included this one because I know people enjoy coffee, and I figured I would say something that made you happy in the middle of this episode. No, I'm just kidding. But the benefits of tea consumption and coffee consumption are pretty consistent and pretty significant. So, tea and coffee consumption are both associated with lower rates of death from any cause, death from heart disease, from brain diseases, from various cancers. And for each beverage, health benefits are seen with multiple cups per day. Like we see benefits up to 4 or 5 cups of coffee per day. Same thing with tea, 4 or 5 cups of tea. As long as you're not over consuming caffeine, and most people, that upper limit is going to be about 400 milligrams or maybe 500 milligrams if you're a larger bodied individual. But you don't want to really go over that on a regular basis, because then it can have negative health effects, can increase blood pressure, it can potentially increase anxiety. But in general, the consumption of tea and coffee, regular consumption of tea and coffee, is going to be protective of your health. If you're currently not drinking tea or coffee, I would recommend incorporating it into your diet. Now, it doesn't have to be coffee. If you don't enjoy coffee, you can try different teas. You can incorporate different teas. Typically, it's the black tea, the green tea, the breakfast teas, like the Earl Grey type teas that are shown to have the health benefits, but herbal teas are probably just fine as well. But some of the benefits are likely due to the caffeine. Some of them are due to some of the micronutrients in the tea. Like, for example, green tea has EGCG, which has been isolated and used as a supplement for various health benefits as well. So you can get some of those benefits just by incorporating tea into your diet on a regular basis. So if you're not drinking coffee or tea, I recommend it. If you're only drinking coffee right now, I would recommend adding some tea to your diet as well, because there's likely to be additional health benefits with incorporating tea as well. And that's a good way to potentially reduce some of your caffeine consumption and also take advantage of some potential additional benefits of another nutritious beverage. Next on the list is going to be cruciferous vegetables. So, consumption of these vegetables is associated with lower rates of several types of cancers. And cruciferous vegetables, they contain compounds called glucosinolates, and these are thought to be protective against tumor cell growth. So, when I say cruciferous vegetables, we're talking about things like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale, and cabbage. And consumption of these on a regular basis is associated with lower rates of cancer. And these compounds are being isolated and used in supplements as well. They have been isolated and tested in several studies showing pretty powerful cancer protective effects. So I recommend incorporating them into your diet on a regular basis. Easy ways to do that, you can have cauliflower rice, you can work kale into soups, into stir fries. Same thing with Brussels sprouts. You can chop them up and put them into stir fries. You can chop them up small, put them into salads. You can chop up the broccoli and put it into a salad. You can cook it into foods. But I recommend trying to figure out ways to incorporate these things into your diet. And I know some people will say, I don't enjoy these things. I don't like the taste of it. But the reality is, you can change the way that things taste by changing the way that you cook it, by using different seasonings, sauces, by pairing it with different things. And you will learn to enjoy the taste of many of these things over time as long as you're persistent with incorporating them into your diet, and you're likely going to experience a positive health effect as a result. So that is cruciferous vegetables, and that's my plug for why you should learn how to enjoy some of these things that you're probably in your head thinking, I don't like them. You can learn how to enjoy them by being creative and incorporating them into a variety of different foods and cooking them in different ways, like I mentioned earlier. Next on the list is going to be allium vegetables, and allium vegetables includes onions and garlic. And these allium vegetables are associated with lower rates of breast cancer, lower rates of stomach cancers, and lower rates of death from any cause. And this category of foods contains a class of nutrients called organic sulfides. And there's one compound in particular that's been studied quite a bit called allicin, that is an extracted nutrient from garlic. And this has been studied in quite a bit of studies for lowering blood pressure, lowering LDL cholesterol, and more. Recommend just incorporating these into your foods. If you are someone who cooks at home, you can add garlic and onion into almost any cuisine. So the base of nearly any cuisine can include garlic and onions. If you're cooking Italian food or Mexican food or Indian food or Mediterranean food, almost any of these types of cuisines will include some garlic and some onions if you're following traditional recipes. So I recommend incorporating these things into your cooking if you are a home chef, and if you're choosing meals outside of the home, don't shy away from the garlic and onions. And I know they can potentially make your breath smell, so don't eat them at the wrong times, and you really have to eat a lot of them for that to be the case. Next on the list is tomatoes. And tomatoes are a rich source of vitamin C, vitamin K, potassium, lycopene, and other carotenoids. Tomatoes have been shown to reduce blood pressure. They're associated with lower rates of heart disease, stroke, prostate cancer, and gastric cancer. And both fresh and canned and all sorts of processed tomatoes have shown to be beneficial for our health. So, tomato sauces, tomato paste, canned tomatoes, jarred tomatoes, fresh tomatoes, it really doesn't matter. The nutrient, one of the nutrients that's thought to be responsible for a lot of the health benefits of tomatoes, is called lycopene. And this nutrient is actually increased when we cook tomatoes down a little bit. So, cooking tomatoes from a nutritional standpoint is probably a good thing, just like with leafy greens and just like with onions and garlic. Tomatoes are a staple in most cuisines. And so they're very easy to incorporate into normal dishes. I have onions and garlic and tomatoes, and I incorporate them into almost everything that I cook at home. I am just cutting up some veggies or having them already cut and just popping them into the meals. They add flavor, they add nutrition, and you just get used to adding all of these different vegetables and nutrients to your meals, and it doesn't feel like burdensome. I'm talking about all these foods, and you're probably thinking, oh, how am I going to incorporate all these foods? I eat everything I'm talking about here for the most part, and I don't think about it. It's just how I have structured my diet, and it takes a little bit more time at first to think about it. To think about, oh, I'm going to shop for tomatoes, I'm going to buy tomatoes. Now I have to try to incorporate them in different meals, but you can just do one at a time. Maybe focus on tomatoes first, focus on cruciferous vegetables next, focus on leafy greens next. Make it a habit to incorporate these things into your diet. And going through this list, it isn't, hey, you have to eat all of these. Focus on one. Get that one into your diet, then focus on the next one. And you'll, couple months from now, you'll have 7 or 8 new foods into your diet that are very nutritious, that are increasing the nutritional value of your diet overall, that are going to have a positive effect on your health. So simple changes lead to big results when you're consistent with those simple changes and you stack them on one another. So I highly recommend, just take that step. Start working in some of these things. The last thing that I'm going to discuss is herbs and spices. And herbs and spices is a wide variety of different things that I'm discussing here. There's a variety of different nutrients in herbs and spices. Most herbs and spices have powerful antioxidant nutrients, and many of these herbs and spices have positive benefits. They've been isolated and used as supplements, like, for example, turmeric, cayenne pepper. There are studies that show that spicy food consumption, turmeric consumption are associated with lower rates of cancer, lower rates of heart disease, saffron consumption, lower rates of heart disease, lower rates of death from any cause. And these herbs and spices are very nutritious. And eating more herbs and spices is a simple way to add more nutrition to your meal. So, you can start small here too. Just buy like some dried basil, some dried thyme, some dried oregano, maybe an Italian blend. Start adding some of these things to your meals. See how they taste. Add some turmeric, add some cayenne pepper, use some paprika. Experiment with some of these herbs and spices, taste them, smell them, incorporate them into your cooking, and incorporate them into your diet so that you can take advantage of getting more micronutrients from your food in a very simple way. You just sprinkle some herbs and spices on top. So, highly recommend using plenty of herbs and spices in your cooking. Let's say if I'm making spaghetti, for example, I'm going to put a whole bunch of Italian herbs on there, dried Italian herbs. Also, going to put mushrooms, onions, garlic, spinach. Like, I can go through most of this list. Tomatoes. Like, if I make a meal, I'm going to be using a large percentage of these because I've gotten used to that over time, and I've built habits around incorporating these things into my diet over time. And when you do that, you're going to set yourself up for having, like I said, a more nutritious diet overall, and you are going to set yourself up for better health. And when you focus on this angle of things, because so many people want to talk about, stay away from these foods, stay away from these foods. When you focus on the other side of what you can eat more of, you start eating more of these things, you start to see that your diet slowly becomes more nutritious and more nutritious, and there's less room for some of the other stuff that you wanted to avoid in the first place. And you don't need to avoid it if you're already eating a nutritious diet. There's no reason that you can't have a little bit of ice cream in the context of a very nutritious diet. And if you focus on building a nutritious diet, you don't have to worry about all these restrictions and these fears around various foods. So that is the list. Let me go over it really quickly. First one is mushrooms. Next is going to be citrus fruits. Then we got berries, cherries, grapes, dark leafy greens, nuts, tea and coffee, cruciferous veggies, allium vegetables, tomatoes, and herbs and spices. And as I mentioned, this is a shorter part of a longer list that I include in a course called the Nutrition Mastery Blueprint course that I offer. And if you're interested in that, you can take advantage of a limited time discount by going to dradrianchavez.com/mastery or just dradrianchavez.com and clicking on the button somewhere on the homepage that will take you to more information about the course. I hope this episode was helpful and informative. And if you enjoy the show, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a review. I appreciate all of you who left a review and participated in the giveaway. I have drawn the winners, and Laura and Lisa were our winners. I'm not going to say their last name for privacy reasons, but I have reached out to them for their free book that I'm giving away, Dr. Id's Saturated Facts. So thank you all for those of you who left a review, sent me an email. And I really appreciate those of you who leave reviews and share the podcast. I know I keep saying this, but month after month, the podcast continues to grow, and I really appreciate it. And it's thanks to you all. So hope you all enjoyed this episode. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and we will talk soon.